Silence has a sound out here in the high desert. It isn't the absence of noise. It's the sound of a man waiting for a ghost to knock. My name is Silas Vance. I've spent 54 years learning how to read the wind, how to talk to horses, and how to bury things that were never meant to see the light of day. People think the West was one with Winchesters and grit. They're wrong. It was one with secrets. If these stories, the real, raw tales of the Old West, mean something to you, then do me a favor. Tap that subscribe button and hit the notification bell. We're building a camp here for the folks who still believe in honor, grit, and the truth, no matter how much it hurts. Join us, because out here, the stories don't end. They just get deeper. I've lived on this ranch for 20 years alone. I thought I knew every inch of these floorboards. I thought I knew the rhythm of my own heart. But then she showed up, stumbling out of a dust storm like a prayer no one wanted answered. She was carrying a bundle, her eyes wider than a corner doe's, and her hands. They were stained with the kind of red that doesn't just wash off with soap and water. I took her in. I gave her a bed and a fire. But 3 nights ago, while the wind was howling through the eaves, I heard it, a scratching, a rhythmic, desperate thudding coming from beneath the pine planks of her room. I waited until she went to get water from the well. I took a crowbar to that floor. I thought I was looking for stolen gold. I thought I was looking for a weapon. But when that board snapped back, when I saw what she'd been keeping down there in the dark, my blood didn't just run cold. It froze. Because some things, once they're uncovered, ensure that the storm had been brewing for 3 days. Not a rainstorm. Those are blessings. This was a dust-shrouded devil, a red roller that turned the New Mexico sky into the color of a fresh bruise. I was out by the stables, checking the hinges on the barn door, when the wind shifted. It brought a smell that didn't belong to the sage or the horsehair. It smelled like burnt copper and old fear. I saw her then, a silhouette against the haze. She wasn't riding. She was walking, her feet dragging through the silt. She was wearing a dress that might have been yellow once, but was now the color of the earth. She collapsed 20 yards from my porch. I didn't reach for my gun. Not at first. You don't shoot a woman who's already dead on her feet. I carried her inside. She was light, dangerously light, like a bird with broken wings. Her name, she told me later in a voice that sounded like grinding gravel, was Clara. She didn't talk about where she came from. She didn't talk about the man who had clearly put those bruises on her throat. She just clutched a small leather satchel to her chest like it was her own beating heart. I gave her the spare room, the one at the back of the house where the floorboards are original pine, thick and heavy. For a week, we lived in a hollow silence. I made coffee. I fried bacon. I sat on the porch and whittled at a piece of cedar. She stayed in that room. She'd come out for water, her eyes darting to the windows every time a shutter creaked. She wasn't just hiding, she was waiting. It was the 8th night when the scratching started. I was in the kitchen, cleaning my 1873 Colt. The house was quiet, save for the wind. Then, thump, scrape, thump. It was coming from her room. Not the sound of someone walking, the sound of someone digging. I stood by her door, my breath held tight in my chest. I could hear her whispering. Not to me, not to God. It was a frantic, rhythmic chanting. Not yet, she was saying. Stay down. Stay quiet. Not yet. The next morning, she looked gray. She wouldn't look me in the eye. When she went out to the pump to wash her face, I felt a pull, a dark, gravitational curiosity that a man my age should have known better than to follow. I went into her room. The air felt heavy, stagnant. I looked at the corner by the wardrobe. The rug had been moved. I fetched the crowbar from the mudroom. My hands were shaking, and I told myself it was just the tremors of an old man's nerves. I wedged the iron into the seam. The wood screamed as it gave way. I expected gold. I expected a ledger of stolen cattle. Instead, I found a hole, and inside that hole, wrapped in a blood-soaked Union jacket, was a box made of dark, heavy iron. It wasn't locked. It didn't need to be. The weight of it was enough to keep the lid down. I opened it. Inside weren't coins. They were badges. 10 stars. Dozens of them. Some were bent. Some were scorched, but every single one of them had a name engraved on the back. Marshals, sheriffs, deputies, names I recognized from the missing posters in town. Names of men who had ridden out to clean up the territory and never come back. But that wasn't why I froze. At the bottom of the box, beneath the pile of dead men's stars, was a photograph. It was old, the edges curled by heat. It showed a group of men standing in front of this very ranch. My ranch. And in the center of the group, smiling with a coldness that made the sun feel like ice, was the man who had sold me this land 20 years ago. The local judge, Judge Holloway. In the photo, he was holding a rope. And at the end of that rope was a woman who looked exactly like Clara. Not her mother, not her grandmother. Her. The photo was dated 1862. I looked at the date again. Then I looked at the badges. Then I looked at the door. Clara was standing there. She wasn't holding the water bucket anymore. She was holding a small, double-barreled Derringer, and her face, it wasn't the face of a victim anymore. It was the face of a woman who had been waiting 20 years for someone to find her graveyard. "You weren't supposed to pry, Silas," she said. Her voice was no longer gravelly. It was as clear and cold as a mountain stream. "Who are you?" I asked, my voice a ghost of itself. "I'm the one they couldn't bury deep enough," she replied. "And those badges, those aren't trophies. They're a map." She stepped into the room. I looked down at the badges. "Why are you here now?" "Because the judge is coming," she whispered. "He's coming because he knows I escaped the asylum he tucked me away in. He knows I have the book of names. And he knows this is the only place left where the bodies are still talking." As if on cue, the sound of hoofbeats echoed from the ridge road. Not one horse. 4, maybe 5. They weren't riding like ranchers. They were riding with the heavy, rhythmic thud of men who were coming to finish a job started 2 decades ago. I looked at Clara. I looked at the crowbar in my hand. I'm an old man. I've lived a quiet life because I didn't want to see the world for what it really was. But looking at those badges, at the names of men who had died trying to do the right thing, I felt a fire ignite in my marrow that I thought had gone out at Gettysburg. "Go to the kitchen," I said. Standing up, my joints popped, but my grip on the crowbar was iron tight. Under the sink, there's a false panel. There's a Coach gun and 2 boxes of buckshot. She didn't blink. "You're going to fight for me? You don't even know me." "I know those names on the badges," I said, "and I know that Judge Holloway owes me 20 years apiece." The riders pulled up in the yard. The dust was so thick you could taste it. Judge Holloway dismounted. He looked older, his hair a shock of white, but that same cold smile was etched into his face. He held a cane topped with silver, and he tapped it against the porch steps. "Silas," he called out, "I hear you've taken in a stray. A very confused, very dangerous stray. Why don't you bring her out here? We can settle this over a glass of rye." I stepped out onto the porch. I didn't have the shotgun yet. I just had my Colt on my hip and a look on my face that made the judge's smile falter. "The rye's gone bad, Judge," I said, "and the floorboards are up." The silence that followed was heavier than the dust. The men behind the judge, hired guns by the look of them, shifted in their saddles. Their hands drifted toward their holsters. "Silas," Holloway said, his voice dropping an octave, "you've been a good neighbor. Don't let a crazy woman's lies ruin a 20-year friendship. She's sick. She belongs in the care of the state." "I found the badges, Holloway," I said. The judge stopped tapping his cane. The mask of the civilized man didn't just slip, it shattered. His eyes turned into black pits of malice. "Then you've lived 19 years longer than you should have," he said. He raised his hand. It was a signal, but Clara was faster. The window behind me shattered as the barrels of the Coach gun poked through. Boom! The lead rider was blown clean off his horse. The yard erupted into chaos. I dove behind a porch pillar as bullets began to chew into the wood. The air was filled with the scent of sulfur and splinters. I pulled my Colt. I didn't aim for the men. I aimed for the horses. A rider on the ground is just a man. A man on a horse is a god. 2 horses reared, throwing their riders into the dirt. Clara fired again. Boom! One of Holloway's men screamed, clutching his shoulder. But Holloway, he didn't run. He stood in the middle of that lead-filled air like he was made of stone. He pulled a small, elegant pistol from his waistcoat and leveled it at me. "This land was mine," he shrieked over the roar of the wind. "I built this territory out of the bones of better men than you." He fired. The bullet grazed my temple, blood stinging my eyes. I leveled my Colt, my thumb fanning the hammer. Crack, crack, crack. 3 rounds. One for the badges, one for the woman in the photograph, and one for the 19 years I'd lived in a graveyard without knowing it. The judge fell backward. He didn't scream. He just hit the dust, his silver-topped cane rolling away into the sagebrush. The remaining riders didn't stay to fight. Without their payday, they were just cowards with spurs. They turned and vanished into the red haze of the storm. The silence returned, but it was different now. The ghosts I'd been hearing for 20 years, they seemed to have finally gone quiet. I walked over to the judge. You don't know. He wheezed. "There are more under the barn, under the creek." "Then we'll find them all." Clara's voice came from behind me. She was standing on the porch, the shotgun resting against her hip. She looked at the judge, not with hatred, but with profound, terrifying pity. "And we'll give them their names back." The judge died as the sun began to break through the dust. We didn't call the sheriff. We knew the sheriff was likely on the judge's payroll. Instead, we spent the next 3 days working. We didn't just pry up the floorboards in her room. We went to the barn. We went to the old well. By the end of the week, there were 32 small wooden crosses standing on the hill overlooking the ranch. Each one had a tin star nailed to the center. Clara stayed. She didn't ask, and I didn't offer. We just started. We fixed the porch. We painted the house. We planted a garden over the spot where the judge had fallen. People in town talk. They say Silas Vance went crazy. They say he's living with a witch who speaks to the dead. Maybe they're right. But let me tell you something. I've never slept better. Because for the first time in 20 years, the floorboards don't scratch. The wind doesn't whisper. And the truth is finally out in the sun where it belongs. You see,